Good morning, delegates. Thank you for all being here this morning. I know it's a very early start, and before we begin this session on the environment, community and local government, for the few who are in the room, I want you to spread the word, which is about the running of this morning. We are up against time this morning, as always, but particularly because we have a TV session beginning at 11, but we have to finish at 10:40 to change over. So because of that, I have to only take speakers who are against motions as a preference. If there are speakers in favour, other than the proposers, obviously, who desperately, burningly have to speak on an issue, I will try and facilitate that. But we will be under considerable time pressure, and I would really ask for your cooperation. It's not ideal, but it's better than having motions fall off the agenda altogether, that we don't get to them at all. So for the most part, I'll try and take anybody against, and I will take some in favour depending on time, but I may have to limit the number of speakers today, in this morning's session. So with that said, and I hope you understand the reasoning behind it, I'm going to ask now for Minister Alan Kelly, Minister for Environment, to introduce this section on the environment, community and local government, and to introduce motion 27. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. Dear friends, colleagues and comrades, congratulations for all of you who got out of bed early. Well done. I note a large contingent here from Tipperary. It's a case of haven't, I'd say. So it's great to be here this morning. It's an honour to be here as Minister for the Environment, and it's an honour to be here as your Deputy Party Leader, and thank you for that. So prior to addressing, I want to propose motion number 27, and also I want to just talk a little bit about the department, and believe it or not, and my area of responsibility, believe it or not, it's not just about water, it's not just about housing, there are quite a number of other areas that we're dealing with as well. With working with my colleague Anne Phelan, we are working very hard in the whole area of rural development and social inclusion. And I want to address some concerns the delegates have in relation to this, and particularly in relation to the SICAP funding, which many delegates have asked about over the last few months. And let me state categorically here and now, there will be absolutely no privatisation of community development programmes. The SICAP funding will be announced on Monday, and we have a programme of funding available, which I believe is absolutely essential across many vulnerable parts of our country. I want to thank my colleagues Anne Phelan and Ayan O'Riordan for working with me on that as well. In the area of planning, we will legislate, we'll have two planning bills this year. We will legislate for a vacant site levy to incentivise development across the country in particular areas where we need social housing. But it's also very important for large rural towns where we've seen decay over the last 20 years, which is unacceptable. We'll be amending the Part 5 in the planning legislation to ensure that developers will absolutely not be allowed to buy their way out of social housing commitments, and also where we'll have proper mixed tenure development in future. I will ensure that local authorities will build houses rather than take money. We will legislate for climate change. And colleagues, do you know what? I've heard enough about the Greens. The Greens were in power for 4 years. And what did they do in relation to climate change legislation? Zero. Nothing. I'm absolutely delighted to be the first minister ever in the history of this state to bring forward a comprehensive climate change bill, which will be going through the Oireachtas at the moment. In relation to the motions that are ahead of us, there's some very important motions. We will go through them in detail. There are quite a number in relation to the private rental sector, which I believe is absolutely the most acute issue we need to deal with now in the coming year, in my area of responsibility. Despite the fact that the state pays 500 million a year in rental supports to various types, we still have quite amateur rental sector with many accidental landlords. It is not a sophisticated sector. It's a sector that certainly needs some form of intervention from the state in order to ensure that those who are paying massive rents don't have to do so into the long term, and that's something that I'm absolutely dedicated to addressing. We have the Residential Tenancies Act, which is currently going before the Oireachtas, and I believe that will be one of the most important opportunities we have to give people security of tenure and provide for certainty in rents and remove fears of drastic changes into the future. And I know, colleagues, you share my concern in relation to that. A number of measures have been taken recently in relation to this, and I can assure you that it's a top priority for me going forward. We also have a number of motions in relation to social housing. As you know, we have over 4 billion available to us to build social housing. And let me say this quite clearly. It is always the Labour Party who builds houses, who builds social houses for those who need them. Before me, it was Brendan Howlin. Before that, it was Jimmy Tully, and on, all the way down to TJ O'Connor many decades ago. And we are the party. We're the party that always delivers in social housing, and will continue to do so. So I look forward to them.
Thank you, Minister.
I look forward to the motions and addressing you later on.
Thank you very much. We move to motion 28 from the Central Council. Is there a proposer or formal proposer from the Central Council? Formally? There's no other speakers indicating on motion 28. So again, motion 29 is from the Central Council. Is there a proposer formally from the Central Council? No other speakers, so we'll move to motion 30 from the Central Council. A proposer? Formally proposed again, and moving then to motion 31, the proposer from Dalkey Killiney branch, Dún Laoghaire. Is the proposer in the hall? We're getting through this quicker than I thought. Formally? Formally, okay, thank you. Motion 32, Galway City Central branch, Galway West proposing. We have a proposer, thank you.
Niall Kelly, Galway City Central branch. Chairperson, I'll be brief, so I don't propose to detail all of the aspects of the difficulties experienced by many families and individuals in the housing rental sector. Unfortunately, we are all too familiar with many of those stories. At this point, 1 in 5 households in Ireland rely on the private rental sector to provide their housing. And this is the highest number since the 1950s. Since 2012, rents in the Dublin area have increased by approximately 30%. And that's now extending out into the counties beyond Dublin and indeed to other urban areas and cities across the country. So we need to deal with this escalation in rents, not just in the Dublin area, but across the country. I commend the party in government and Minister Alan Kelly in particular for the commitment to 3.8 billion investment in social housing. But we also need to address the question of control of rent increases. And it's not an either or. And I welcome the remarks of the Minister here this morning. In many European countries, rent regulation is the norm, and it prevents landlords from increasing rents, in some cases restricting rent increases to perhaps 16 to 20% over a 3-year period. So we need to deal with this issue. We cannot leave it to the market to regulate itself in the housing area. We have seen where that reliance on the private housing market has brought us in the case of housing, and indeed we have seen how the self-regulation has brought us to where we have been in the last number of years, not just in the housing market, but in other areas of the economy. So I ask you to support motion 32 on rent controls. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for that. And I have one speaker on this motion, John Dowling, Mount Marion Kilmacud. 2 minutes, John. Thank you.
Very briefly, Chair. if we're going to build more houses, which we should, we have to make sure that we address the situation that is already there, and that is the ghettoization of much of our urban housing. There was an article yesterday in the Irish Times which said you can now look up, school by school, the makeup, the ethnic or the background, the national background makeup of school persons or pupils at schools. And there are some schools in the larger urban areas, particularly the Dublin area, which are exclusively made up of the children of immigrants to Ireland. This is storing up problems big time for the future at an education level, at a social level, and one of the ways of breaking it is to ensure that our housing policy does not allow ghettos to continue to move from the private sector into the public social housing sector. All we're doing in that sense is using public money to store up and festering problems into the future.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you. And before I move to motion 33, just one announcement. There's a silver car 05D33264 outside the front door, which needs to be moved. Please, thank you. Now I'll just ask Councillor Letty McCarthy from the Sandyford branch to propose motion 33.
Good morning, delegates. Great to see it so full here this morning. Now, with this motion, we met, the main item on our agenda a couple of months ago in the Sandyford branch was to formulate a motion for conference here this weekend. And as you can appreciate, there were many worthwhile topics. But maybe it was because I got 2 phone calls on that day from 2 various families who were very worried and concerned because they had got contact from their landlords to increase their rent. And you might think 2 phone calls isn't a whole lot, but 2 phone calls are 2 very real families. And there are some weeks that I might get several phone calls like that. So let's just imagine this family were the Murphy family, and let's imagine that they were living in Sandyford and Mrs. Murphy was working in Sandyford Industrial Estate. Mr. Murphy was working in Cherrywood. They have 3 children. They have John, who just started in first year UCD, and they had managed to pay the second part of his fees with very creative budgeting. They have Mary then, who's in 3rd year in the local community school, just about to do her junior cert. And they have little Tommy, who's in the local primary school in 5th class. And obviously he's very happy, he loves his friends, he's looking forward to moving into 6th class with his friends where he's top of the pile, he'll make his confirmation and he'll move on to big school. So I think sometimes when we think about these people as real people rather than just vulnerable families or whatever other wording we use for them. And for Mr. and Mrs. Murphy, they are looking, they're on daft.ie and all the other sites, wondering how they can continue to live in this instance in Dublin. And of course they have all of those difficulties. If they move to a different county, can they keep their jobs? And then think of the children, oh, that's not fair, Mum. I want to stay with my friends. I love my friends. I'm playing football with the local GAA team. These are all the real things. The 15-year-old girl in junior cert, she doesn't want to have to move to a different county and a different school and start all over again where she's just finding her feet. So that is why, delegates, when you're considering this motion this morning, I want you to think of the imaginary Murphy family and families like that are really doing their best. They're getting up every day, they are working hard, and they are working for the essentials. They're not trying to budget for their holidays or their meals out. They are literally trying to work out on day to day. So please support this motion.
Thank you very much, Letty. Thank you. Motion 34 has been withdrawn from the Wicklow East Carlow branch because the matter has been dealt with by government. So we're moving then to motion 35, the Tala East branch, Dublin South West, proposing. Is there a proposer or formally? Is there somebody from the branch to formally propose? Or if Is there anybody from the branch? Because a motion has to be proposed by the branch. Otherwise it will fall. There's nobody. Oh, yeah. No. It's Eamon, are you indicating? Yes, you're. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Delegates, I'll be very brief about this. It's a very specific motion. Relates to the difficulties that's emerging in relation to the private rental sector, which I don't need to tell you is pretty much out of control, especially in larger urban areas. And our branch are of the view, as are others, that the only way to deal with this, because of the increase, the huge increases in the private rental sector, is that we would have a rent freeze. When we say a rent freeze, what we mean is that the present increases in rent, private rental sector, bears no relationship to the income index, none whatsoever. It's a case of landlords exploiting a lack of private accommodation. What's happening is no longer is it just individuals who are losing their homes, their rented homes, it's families who are losing the rented homes. And I know the argument has been presented in the past that you can't freeze rents because of constitutional issues, etc., etc. But what use is a constitution that only protects landlords? We're the Labour Party. We should protect tenants, and you and I should not be part of seeing any family being evicted from their house or having to go and live with relations or friends because private rents are out of control. No family should have to suffer for that. So, delegates, can I ask you if you would support the motion?
Thank you very
Thank
much, Deputy. Thank you, Eamon. The next motion is motion from Dublin South West constituency, motion 36. Is there a proposer? Dublin South West. Is there anybody from the constituency to formally propose? It's formally proposed. No speakers on the motion. Motion 37 is the Booterstown branch, Dunleary, proposing. Formally, anybody from... Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Senator Hayden, thank you.
Thank you very much, delegates. I'm actually really delighted to see the number of motions we have here on the floor around the rented sector. I think it's really indicates the kind of issues that we're really dealing with in the lives of ordinary people in Ireland today. And as another speaker said, I think it's something that the Labour Party in particular needs to take on board. Before I came in here today, I was talking to a girl in her early 20s, and we were talking about the idea that she's part of Generation Rent. And the reality for her and most of her generation is that they don't and won't have the aspiration to own their own homes. And neither will they, in the short term at least anyway, have the aspiration to have secure social housing. We have a lot of people in Ireland living in the rented sector, and it isn't just for the now, it's for the, certainly as we're looking at things, for the medium to longer term. And it isn't fit for purpose. That's the bottom line. And we need to change the way that we do business in the rented sector. The motion before you talks specifically about rent regulation. I think it's very important, and the Minister has made that clarification on a number of occasions. We're not talking about old-fashioned rent control, the kind of thing where you had an old lady sitting there paying £5 a week for the rest of her life. We're talking about modern-day regulating rents so that people know where they stand. Letty made that point very clearly. Families are living in rented housing. They need to know where they're going to be in 12 months' time. They need to know that their children are in the same school. They need to know that their children are in the same GAA club. That's the reality that people are dealing with. And I would ask you, we have a number of motions on this whole area, and I really welcome Alan's statement that he is putting this at the top of his agenda. Rented housing in Ireland has been left behind. It's been left behind historically. a lot of people in rented housing, I come from Dún Laoghaire, a lot of people in rented housing in Dún Laoghaire had gotten off the mailboat coming back from England, and they were left there for the rest of their lives with no security in appalling circumstances. That has to be put behind us as a country. We need to be actually able to give people real homes in the rented sector with real security, and that involves good quality of accommodation, real security of tenure and rent regulation. And I look forward to having a longer discussion with Alan on this issue later on today.
Thank you very much.
And I'd like to ask you, delegates, please support these motions, all of them, and in particular, obviously, the Booterstown branch motion.
Thank you very much, Senator. I'll ask now Joe O'Connor from the Fitzgerald Kearney branch to speak on the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. The Minister for Finance described the current rental market as not currently meeting the needs of our citizens in the recent budget speech, and I welcome the Minister's announcement that state intervention is now necessary in our private rented sector. The Minister has taken a particularly hands-on approach in dealing with the homeless crisis and also with building social housing, and it's important that this issue is at the top of Labour's agenda in 2015. We need something that will provide greater security of tenure for people in the private rented market. And rent controls can be done and has been done in a progressive and sustainable way across Europe. We need to make a clear distinction between rent freezes or first-generation rent controls, which no longer retain economic credibility across Europe, and tenancy or second-generation rent controls, which are linked to the consumer price index, inflation, or capped at a percentage above the average market rent. These operate successfully in many countries such as Denmark, Belgium and Switzerland and offer more certainty. The particular scheme that's referred to in this motion, the Mietspiegel Rent Index Policy Control in Germany, controls rent increases where between 2000 and 2012 there was an increase of less than 5% in rent, at the same time as unregulated prices in France doubled during that year. This would guarantee landlords market rents at the beginning of a new tenancy and prevent them from exploiting market conditions through proper regulation. Given our recent history, the chaotic and turbulent market nature of the Irish property sector and the Irish rental market means that us as a nation, more than anyone, need to take on the private rented market in terms of housing, because it is the biggest issue in terms of the social crisis around homelessness and around the cost of living crisis that many of our citizens are facing. So I urge you to please support the motion.
Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you. Next motion is motion number 37, Booterstown branch, 38, Sligo Leitrim constituency proposing,
Morning, comrades and friends. John Feely, Sligo Leitrim. Conference calls on the government to utilise the financial resources of the credit union movement to invest in social housing. The credit union movement is one of, I suppose, the best examples of the cooperative movement, with 3.3 million members. It's a remarkable movement, and it has gone through some difficulties in some credit unions, which we all know. But I can state as a member of a small credit union in my own area, we've come through the worst. Now, this movement has 10.7 billion in savings. And any of you members of a credit or directors of credit union realise there is a problem. There's a problem that the credit union movement has an awful lot of money that it can't lend out at this point in time. There's 70%, that's 7 billion euro available. And the credit union movement is there, a not-for-profit organisation that wants to use the money for the society's benefit. And here, one suggestion we have from our own constituency council, that some of this money be invested via some form of a special purpose vehicles, because what might be the movement itself is, well, it's centred in the local area, but it's quite possible that the money we don't want any more houses in my area in County Leitrim, but we want to get ourselves involved in maybe social housing elsewhere, but it has to be controlled. There has to be some form of security, because the one thing we do say to our members, their savings are secure. Now, last night there was a motion from Fetter Tipperary branch, a motion to have social housing for elderly living in the community rather than having to necessarily go into nursing homes. And I thought, that's an example there of the kind of social housing I'm thinking of. And that we would need, by the way, in our own area. And in fact, we have a good example in the local town that there's housing for senior citizens is very near the local hospital, and people feel secure in that. So here is a way of us utilising our resources and availing. And the credit union has said so publicly, nationally, this money is available. So let us find some way of channeling into good social needs and satisfying customers' social requirements as well.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you. Motion 39. We've no speakers on 38. Motion 30. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Yep, go ahead. John Dowling from Mount Mary and Kilmacud. Thank you, John.
First of all, I ask forgiveness of John Feely for standing up here and perhaps throwing some water on his proposal. John and I worked in various capacities. My heart says this is a great idea, but my head says credit union savings are short-term savings. Credit union loans are short-term loans. The business model of a housing investment for credit unions would mean using short-term savings for long-term loans, and let me tell you, that is a business model that is not sustainable in a crisis. I think that there may be ways of unlocking the funds that the credit unions have, but I think my instincts are that it may be possible to find a way, but my instincts are that we should be very conservative with the savings of with small savers, which make up the bulk of credit unions, and small loans on short-term basis, which make up the bulk of their business. To sink your money into long-term investments when you have short-term savers is a dangerous financial move, and I would ask John to reconsider this motion. But I think the sentiment is worthy of support.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I actually do have another speaker. It just was I missed the piece of paper. John O'Brien from the Mallow 2 Cork East branch. Thanks.
Again, I agree with the sentiment, but in the present context, I think it is dangerous for the savers to invest in the property market, that the money could be endangered, and most of the savers are ordinary people, and that while I agree with this sentiment, I think that we should be very careful about accepting this motion. Sorry. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Thank you for that. We'll move now to Ballyfermot branch, Dublin South Central, proposing motion 39. Is there anybody to formally propose from Ballyfermot branch? Formally? Formally proposed Siobhan, great. Okay. We've no speakers on that motion. The next motion, 40, Edenmore Airfield branch, Dublin Bay North. We have a proposer. Owen Scott.
Thank you, Chair. First and foremost, I think we need to commend the Minister. He has put in place the biggest ever commitment to funding for social housing at 3.8 billion. So that's an absolutely marvellous development in this field. Also, the publication of Housing 2020 and the detailed actions contained within, many of which have already commenced, is also to be commended. A real approach to moving ahead with public social housing. We have to recognise that a significant number of housing units have been supplied off balance sheet, particularly through the NAMA Special Purpose Vehicle. We welcome the provision of a financial vehicle to raise additional funding and hope that it will become operational ahead of the planned implementation in Q2 2016. So really we hope that we can move a little bit faster even than that timetable that has already put forward by the Minister. But We would particularly call on the government to set up this vehicle as a public housing institute. Now, there is already a proposal that a task force is established, but we really feel, and this is the motion, is really asking that a public housing institute, which should be the body that liaises with the public authorities to drive and coordinate the building programme in order to maximise the opportunities arising from the funding, is put in place. That is the only way to make sure that the Labour approach to the public housing initiative is really carried through. So, a commendation for the Minister. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. We've no other speakers on that motion. Motion 41, Portroe branch proposing from Tipperary.
Charlie McGee, representing the Portroe branch on motion 41. With regards to affordable water and increased investment, Minister Alan Kelly TD has took a firm hand over the management of Irish water and the introduction of domestic charges that was very obvious to anyone in the country. He introduced certainty, clarity and affordability to household water bills. The new charging structure means nobody will pay more than 1% of their income or benefits on water, which is well below the United Nations definition of water poverty. He's introduced increased investment in water infrastructure, which will remove many boil water notices, lead pipes, and various other water issues. There will be investment which will increase by 100 million this year and grow significantly in later years. He's removed the possibility of future privatisation on water services. He's taken on board the idea of water charges and introduced policies that are based in Labour. Regarding building homes and reform, Alan has introduced the largest ever state investment in social housing, with $4 billion earmarked to 2020 to deal with the housing crisis, biggest obviously in the state. This will eliminate waiting lists while creating 29,000 jobs, obviously, which is needed within the country. There's a return to direct house building by local authorities, and it's the first comprehensive social housing strategy since 1997, which will increase house spending by 40% for 2015 to 800 million to put over 7,000 people in homes. He's announced the establishment of the Dublin Social Housing Delivery Task Force and the new Part 5 requiring developers to build social housing for new developments. Regarding homelessness, Minister Alan Kelly, since he's taken over last summer, has introduced €25 million of an action plan for homelessness being implemented. Which continues to put in place the Housing First homelessness implementation plan with a view to eliminating involuntary homelessness by 2016. He's taken on the issue of rough sleeping with 271 new beds provided and a new night cafe facility for those who choose it instead of emergency accommodation. There is new social housing accommodation policy to house 500 homeless and vulnerable people in Dublin by June, and there's a tenancy production service extending, preventing over 300 families from becoming homeless.
Thank you, Delegate. Thank you very much, Delegate. Thank you. Motion 42 from the Killarney branch in Kerry here. Is there somebody to propose from the branch? Can somebody ask the person to come quickly? Very quickly. Would I? I'll just move to the next motion and come back to that one to give the speaker a chance. Motion 43, Sean O'Casey branch, Dublin Central. We've Joe Costello TD to propose.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. The voluntary housing sector plays a very valuable role in the provision of social housing, and in general, it is done on a very professional basis. But it has developed organically and independently over the last 30 years, and it is high time we had a very close scrutiny of the plethora of voluntary housing organisations that are in the country. And just to demonstrate how something can go terribly wrong, I'll give you a few points in relation to the saga of Father Scully House under the Catholic Housing Aid Society. It was built by Father Scully, an old Belvederian, and it was built for the poorest of the poor in the inner city. Then it was refurbished in 2006, 9 years ago, and everybody, 40 tenants plus, were put out of it for supposedly 2 to 3 years. 9 years down the road, they've just been put in at Christmas after the department, they didn't even look seriously for any money from the Fianna Fáil government. Our government gave it to it under Alan Kelly, 17 million of taxpayers' money for a refurbishment that more than doubled the size of it, up to 99 units of accommodation. But there were only the people, the old tenants, the original tenants, many of them had died, they were put into temporary accommodation for 2 to 3 years, as I said. They didn't manage to get in until Christmas and through the intervention of the Minister and the Archbishop. And they had been told to pack their bags in July of 2014. 6 months with all their luggage and everything packed, and they could scarcely find a thing in doing their daily business. It was an absolute scandal. The remaining 75 elderly people have still not been processed and have still not moved into one of the best sites of accommodation in the country. So what has really happened then is that the Catholic Housing Agency has decided on its own bat that it would move more or less into the marketplace. It would reject the differential rent, which is based on people's ability to pay, which is the standard rent of the local authorities. It would demand a deposit, which was never demanded before by the voluntary housing agencies, and it would demand an economic rent, as it put it, which would be double the differential rent for people, elderly people who would have been nominated by the local authority to go to it. So really, that's totally unacceptable. But there's another housing agency at the forefront of providing for the homeless, which has decided to do its major refurbishment of two of its large units of accommodation, up to 100, can accommodate over 100 homeless people. And to do that in 2015, at the height of the homeless crisis. Absolutely scandalous. So now, this last point, now with the Minister putting 3.9 billion into a massive social housing programme that will provide tens of thousands of jobs, it is high time to put the voluntary housing sector on a statutory basis, where there's going to be commitments and responsibilities in relation to taxpayers' money on the
Thank you
people
very
of
much,
this country.
Joe. Thank you. Paddy Behan is going to speak on this motion from Dublin Central. Tip 2.
Good morning, Paddy Behan, SIP 2. Also a member of the Sean O'Casey branch of the Labour Party. You know, housing is nothing new, because I can go back. When I got married first, I had to squat in Mountjoy Square with 3 kids. No water, no heating, no nothing. And we formed a thing called the Dublin Housing Action Committee to look at ways and means of housing people. And what we did do was, we took over big accommodation on Waterloo Road, and we moved people in. We moved them into hotels and so forth. That's when Harry Boland was the minister at the time. And we only had two TDs in Dublin. Was Mick O'Leary and the late Mickey Mullins, and O'Leary is dead as well. And the whole question of housing has been a sore point over the years. Now, Alan Kelly has taken it by the short and courage, as the fellow says, and putting it somewhere on the agenda. And the whole question of homeless, you have to realise that a lot of people on substance abuse are homeless because of their abuse. And unfortunately, when they do get accommodation, people who are maybe on the road to recovery, they're going into places where people are shooting up. And that means they might fall again back into the old frame they were in. But I must commend Joe Costello and what he done in the north of the city and whether in the area when the families were burned out off Sean McDermott Street. And I commend them about going out with the food for people who were sleeping out and having so forth. And these are things the Labour Party are believed in, and that's what Connie believed in. That's why he formed the Labour Party.
Thank you.
But Alan, may I come to you on this one point? It's come to my notice that in Inchicore there's a block of accommodation lying idle belonging to NAMA. I wonder could you have a look at that and maybe help those to get accommodation.
Thank you, Paddy. Thanks very much. We'll revert now to motion 42. The proposer from Killarney branch is he offering or she? Yes, Sean. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, for missing the off. I was inclined to vote for people in there, which I felt was important. In moving motion 42, the conference calls on the Labour Party to return power of local government and to restore town councils to towns of about 10,000. Now, I'd like to elaborate a small little bit in relation to the...
That's a different motion, Sean. We're on motion 42.
This is 42. Is it?
It's about the new housing strategy.
I'm sorry, I'm on 49. Sorry.
You're on 49. Okay, can I just hold you for a few minutes?
My anxiety, I apologise,
Okay,
Chair.
Can we have a formal proposer, though, from Killarney? You're on motion 42, formally? Yeah, okay. We'll move then to Composite 3, Dublin North West constituency, proposing, but the Speaker is happy not to speak on this motion. We have a seconder from the Coolock McMulligan branch who may wish to speak in his place. Coolock McMulligan branch. Is it formally seconded? And Dunabate branch, Dublin Fingal, proposing the addendum.
No, I'll be very brief. This is a very tricky situation. There's a plebiscite on one side, and there's a question of whether the plebiscite is adequate to protect the public ownership of water services and sewerage services. So there's a big argument for or against. Our amendment was just simply to strengthen the motion in terms of clarifying the motion. It's neutral on the question of whether or not there should be a referendum. It just clarifies two issues. One is, what is this referendum seeking to protect? It says it's seeking to protect Irish water, but Irish water the name could change, the entity could be restructured. It's really there to protect the public provision of water and sewerage services. So that's one clarification. The other one is that if we're really serious about having a referendum, then we should really put it into the manifesto. So I think you should accept the addendum and then vote one way or the other on the substantive motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And just to say that the proposer is willing to accept the addendum as well, for your information. I don't have any other speakers on that motion. We'll move to the next one, which is the Wicklow East Carlow constituency, proposing motion 45.
Good morning, Chair, comrades. John Graham, Wicklow East Carlow constituency, motion 45. H2O, water, Ishka, whatever you call it, it's the very stuff of life. We all need it in order to live. Indeed, it is a fact that without water, life would never have evolved anywhere in the universe. It's that basic. This motion seeks to ensure that waterway services are available to all in this country. It's in two parts, the motion. Part one is that we in government ensure that Irish Water remains in public ownership / control. We have all seen how public services such as telecoms, when run by private enterprise, have failed to deliver services such as broadband. They cherry pick and they asset strip, and they fail then to invest in their networks. Water infrastructure needs a long-term strategy over many years. Investment requirements are such that state involvement is required. Part 2 is that the price of water to the user is such that it needs to be within the ability of people to pay at reasonable rates. And I think that is critical, and it's part of the argument. I know some adjustments have been made in that vein to try and correct that, but I still think it needs to be looked at to make sure we get it right. I'd like to say that I don't know why Bord Gáis were given the task of running Irish Water. They failed to set up a gas network for the whole state. They went to diversify then into generating electricity, which is not their core business, and now we're giving them another business which is not part of the core business. And the way that has been handled so far, I'm not saying under Alan Kelly, but we know who the other man was who got a nice job in Europe afterwards. That wasn't handled correctly. We have failed to have a good strategy over a long period of time. We have leaks, we have underinvestment, and we have had for a long time no national policy. And I don't think it's still quite clear what our national policy is. So I think we need to get this right for all our futures. I ask you to please support motion 45. And I'd just like to say motion 44, I would disagree with totally. When we put the protection of the unborn into the Constitution, look where that led. I don't think putting things like water in the Constitution is appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on that motion is Joe Flynn from the SIP2. Joe, please.
Morning, Chair, Delegates. Joe Flynn from SIP2. While we agree with much of the sentiment of the motion, Chair, we're requesting that the branch would agree to remit the motion back, and I'll explain why. We do support very strongly the call that Irish Water and indeed wastewater treatment would be held in public ownership. And to that end, we do actually strongly support the call for a referendum to enshrine that in the Constitution, because we actually believe it will be the only way in the future to avoid the privatisation of a very valuable resource. Secondly, we also very strongly support the call for much needed investment in the development in relation to the quality of water and indeed wastewater treatment services. Where we disagree with the motion, Chair, is the ambiguity surrounding the call for charges. We in SIP2 believe that it should be the right of every household to have their normal usage free of charge, and that only after that should we charge for waste. That would ensure that there is conservation methods in relation to the production and use of water, and indeed that those who waste the precious commodity are the ones that pay the price for the development of it. So, colleagues, we would be requesting the branch to agree to remit the motion back, as the issue of the charges, we think, is somewhat ambiguous and contrary to what we believe should be the case anyway.
Thank you, Joe. No other speakers offering, so I'll ask now for the North Dock East Wall branch to propose motion 46. Sorry, Delegate. Okay, yes, go ahead, yeah.
John Graham again, speaking on the request to refer the motion back. I don't think that's necessary. There's nothing ambiguous about the fact that we said the charges should be fair, reasonable and equitable. That doesn't exclude giving the basic needs of the people free of charge. That's in there. If it's fair, if it's equitable, then it should be a balanced package. And it should also take into account the need to invest in water. So it's a complicated thing, but I think it's straightforward what the motion is saying. It's saying that when we're supplying water to people, we meet their needs and we do it in a fair, equitable and proper manner. And I ask you to support the motion again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving then to motion 46. Do we have somebody from the North Dock East Wall branch to propose formally? Is there anybody? I need a proposer from the branch for the motion to be taken. Okay, Declan, if you want to come up. If delegates are agreeable that the motion be put with, and the speaker is not from the branch but from a different branch,
Sorry.
Is that agreeable?
Comrades, I'm from Dublin Central, and this is a very important motion. There are many issues Labour can hold their head high up on, and planning is definitely one of them. There are so many families who are victims of dodgy planning and who are suffering really bad floods because their houses were built so poorly. And I think we know why. There was a recent drama called Charlie on RTE. And I think that we need to show solidarity to people who are affected by floods. We need to show that we're a party that can make government work, and we can show that, especially now that people are paying directly for local government and that we have a sustainable funding source for local government, that we can protect people who are affected by floods. But if we have invested and if we have protected people by floods, those people should then be given flood insurance. And unfortunately, even the government could spend millions in flood mitigation measures, and then people are denied insurance for floods. This isn't acceptable, and what we want is to put the regulation there to make it happen. Climate change was brought up yesterday. It's a massive issue, and houses that have never flooded before are going to start flooding. Every constituency is going to be dealing with this more and more. This is a very important issue, and hopefully you'll support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Declan. That was a proposal on motion 47. Is there any No, there's no speakers offering on that motion. Motion 48, the Charlie Smith branch, Carlo Kilkenny proposing.
Chahirig Sean O'Hergine, Crave Charlie Smith, Carlo Kilkenny. It's very dangerous to quote ministers who speak at Connolly cafes late at night, but I'm going to start with the answer that Minister Brendan Howlin gave when I raised a question on this motion last night. And that was to the effect that this is the biggest mistake in his mind that Labour have made since we entered government. And in his phrase, he and we took our eye off the ball in relation to the issue. There was a Swedish speaker, former leader of the Swedish Social Democrats, and 2 British councillors, and they couldn't countenance what happened under the People First document last year, which was the abolition, to my mind, of the level of local government which is closest to the hearts and minds of people in Ireland, particularly those who live, and it's now almost 70% of us who live in urban areas, in large towns and in smaller and larger cities whose councils have found themselves abolished. I believe fundamentally that politically the decision was fundamentally stupid for the Labour Party. It is where we have always based our base of support. There is also the very basics of the history. Having served as mayor of Kilkenny City in my adopted town, our council met for the first time in 1321. And at the stroke of a pen, the genius of a minister from that constituency tore up 1,000 years of history, told us to park our sword, park our mace, park our charters that we had over 1,000 years, and forget about the existence of a council that meant a huge amount to the people of the city. And I said it at the time, and I said it in Dublin Castle on the day that the minister made that ill-fated announcement, that what we were doing is we were taking away a layer of government and a piece of history that was irreplaceable. But most importantly for us, it's about bringing democracy as close as possible to the people. And I say this as somebody who comes from a rural area. So while we want town government, I would like to see what the Barrington Commission proposed in the late 80s, early 90s, which is that we would have a functioning level of local government in rural areas as well. Because take it from me, speaking to the 50 councillors who remain, the so-called municipal districts that were created under this Act are a joke. The municipal district of Kilkenny City now covers half of County Kilkenny, with 3 other major towns as part of it, as well as Kilkenny City. It is no longer the Council of Kilkenny City. The Mayor of Kilkenny City, in reality, is no longer the Mayor of the City of Kilkenny and isn't regarded this way. This is the way local government is done in every country around the world, from the United States to Britain to France to the most important social democratic countries with which we align ourselves. We need to re-establish the principle of town and municipal local government. We need to give a commitment in our manifesto to do so, and I would urge Minister Kelly and our the Taoiseach Joan Burton to prioritise this as being crucial to the future of the development of our party, because without it we will find it hard to rebuild into the place where we were in 2011 and hopefully beyond and better as we deserve.
Thank you. John Walsh from the Ballinasloe Galway Roscommon constituency is speaking on this motion.
Thank you, Chair. Johnny Walsh, Ballinasloe branch, Roscommon, Galway. I feel very, very passionate about this matter. I feel that the abolition of town councils was quite simply an affront to democracy. What we did, we removed the closest and the most efficient unit of local government in this country. And that's not just me saying that or the former speaker saying that. No less an authority than Dr. Aid Quinlivan, one of the foremost authorities on local authorities in this country, has written extensively about that. Could I say that although this was a Fine Gael initiative, we as a party, unfortunately, stood idly by. We certainly weren't enthusiastic about implementing it, but equally, we weren't very enthusiastic about opposing it either. We just stood idly by, and it didn't do us as a party any credit. It certainly, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, in my view, were laughing all the way to the bank with regard to this, because traditionally Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have their strength out in the county councils, while we were, in a sense, cutting our right arm off, because our strength comes from cities and towns. That's traditionally where we have our support. Did it make financial sense? Now, I'm not an economist, but I'm going to give you an example. In my county in Galway, we culled, for want of a better word, 27 town councillors, 9 from Ballinasloe, 9 from the council in Ballinasloe, 9 from Tuam and 9 from Loughrea. And in its place, there was 9 extra county councillors created. The 9 extra county councillors, in terms of salary, cost £100,000 or euros more than the 27 town councillors. Does that make financial sense? I think not. Certainly, I feel that the direct focus that was always on towns as a result of having a town council is now lost. My town in Ballinasloe is now not a budgetary authority, it's not a housing authority, it's not a planning authority. And I'll give you an example. As a former town councillor, I have people coming to me in local authority estates, and they're telling me, Johnny, is this a joke?
Johnny.
Just 1 second, Chair. Is this a joke? The county council are telling us that they're too busy to come out for repairs, while when we had an efficient town council, so things like that would happen straight away. I'm going to be very, very brief now. I just want to say that we in the Labour Party, always prided ourselves on being a party of fairness and democracy. And if we're going to stick to that, I think we should make a commitment here today to restore town councils. And I would urge Alan Kelly, who I know wasn't enthusiastic about abolishing town council, to take this on board and restore town council. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I ask Jeff McAvoy now from Dublin Fingal on this motion, and finally then Declan Walsh to speak on motion 48.
Comrades, I'm just here to speak against the addendum proposed by the John O'Leary branch. I fully support motion 48. I'll be voting for it, provided that the addendum is voted down. I'm from Dublin Fingal. Delegates, Fingal was described recently as the anvil upon which the housing crisis will be solved. And in solving that crisis, or attempting to, the Labour Party councillors on Fingal County Council proposed a motion that the local property tax would be reduced by 10%, and the remaining 5% of the 15% potential cut, that remaining 5% would be ring-fenced for homeless services. In the teeth of a housing crisis, that motion was voted down by Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Sinn Féin, and the cynical opportunists who purport to be on the left. Delegates, there are political forces in this country that would gladly see our local authorities bereft of the funding they need to pay for the essential community services that all of our communities rely on. Motions like this and proposals like this, as proposed by the John O'Leary branch, would give them just the opportunity they need to do so. Please vote against the John O'Leary branch addendum and then vote for motion 48. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. We'll take the addendum next, but I want to ask Declan Walsh. Declan, I'm not sure your constituency. Cork North Central.
Good morning, delegates. Declan Walsh, Jerry O'Sullivan branch, Cork North Central. Could I fully endorse everything that has been said in relation to the abolition of local town councils that took place under, unfortunately, our watch in government? The reality was that the method under which town councils had operated and previously UDCs was flawed. It needed reform. It needed a huge look in terms of boundaries and updating of those towns and those urban areas that required local representation. But the one thing it did not require was abolition. What have we been left with? We have been left with these very large electoral areas which are becoming like mini Dáil constituencies. Those of you who are councillors will understand what it was required to get elected in terms of thousands upon thousands of votes, in terms of a larger electoral area to represent each time. The only beneficiary of what happened has been unelected chief executives of local authorities who have more and more power, who have more and more control, taken away from towns, taken away from urban areas and centralised in county and city offices. That is not good for democracy, it's not good for the rule of law, it is not good for the way that we should be planning and going forward. So I ask the Minister that we look at this again. We welcome in particular in Cork the Minister's recent announcement to review the role of local government in Cork, where for years Cork City Council and Cork County Council have looked at each other, have refused to engage in relation to the boundary changes, and the Minister in relation to that and in relation to Galway has brought forward review groups that will be reporting later in the year. So I fully endorse the motion from Kilkenny and ask you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask the John O'Leary branch now to propose the addendum to this motion? Can we formally? If there's nobody from the John O'Leary branch, the addendum will fall. Is there anybody from the branch? The addendum then it will fall. Is there any formally from the branch? Great. Okay, it has been formally put. Okay, Sean has said there the proposer won't accept the addendum for your information from the John O'Leary branch. Now, the Donnybrook branch, Dublin Bay South, have indicated that they wanted to speak on the addendum. They have their own addendum.
Chairman Dermot Lacey, Donnybrook branch. Can I say, first of all, that it's really terrific to have, for the first time in about 20 years, a real Minister for the Environment and Local Government again. In particular, I want to commend his determination in relation to housing, which was scandalously abandoned during the Celtic Tiger years, and his honesty in relation to Irish Water, that starkly contrasts with the massive dishonesty of the people who will be protesting outside here today, the only left in the world that are opposed to taxation and payment of public services. Can I also say, Chair, since I watch the watch clock for everybody else, can I say I want to use this opportunity to pay tribute to my colleagues and fellow councillors and candidates last May who didn't have the opportunity to be returned, but they flew the flag for Labour in really difficult times. I was proud to be one of them, and I look forward to them to be back. Ireland needs the services of Labour councillors again, and if you don't believe that, watch any meeting of Dublin City Council. Watch the Anti-Austerity Alliance, the People Before Profit, and all the combinations that we have on the far left. and watch them oppose, and never, ever offer anything constructive to ordinary working people. And that is the choice to face the Irish people in Dáil Éireann. If you see what they do at local council level, we need Labour councillors back in strength on local authorities. Can I just say, finally, 2 points. I repeatedly said we cannot reform national politics if we don't reform local government. The opportunity taken by Phil Hogan was a huge missed opportunity. In the spirit of government unity, I hope he's more successful in Brussels than he was in Dublin. We don't need his type of politics again. You cannot reform politics and local government in Dublin, however, without the creation of a directly elected mayor. Some people denied Dubliners that choice last May. Let us be the people that will give it back to them. Let's support this motion.
Thank you, Dermot. Thank you. Delegates, I just want to revert to motion 46, which wasn't tabled formally from the branch. I now have a formal proposer from the branch, so that one is in order. So we'll move now to motion 49 from the James Connolly Killarney branch, Kerry proposing at the second attempt.
That's what makes us good at the football in Kerry. We practice like mad. Delegates, in moving motion 49, I would just like to say that we are not hooked into the figure of 10,000. But the reason we put the 10,000 onto the motion was the fact that we felt that we might get it on the cloud by then. So if I might, at the outset, I'd like to congratulate the Chair and Standing Orders for allowing the two motions, both Carlow Kilkenny and the James Connolly branch, to be put on the cloud. So close after the time that it's not 12 months yet since we made the greatest mistake in local government that this country has ever seen. Now, some person a few minutes ago made the point in relation to Phil Hogan making a big mistake in relation to this one. Don't forget that Mr. Dempsey was the man that started all this ball rolling in relation to getting town councils. And that's what upsets me more than anything else. Having traced up and down the country to conferences and talking to other Labour Party councillors and trying to get individuals and ministers to listen to the point that we were making in relation to the value of town councils to this great party. We have to take the streets back again, whether we like it or not. There'll be 5, 6, 4,000, 3,000 people outside that conference shortly, organised by the radical element of this country who stand for nothing. And we have to take a certain amount of blame for that, because when we got rid of town councils, we handed over the streets of Ireland to the Shinners and to the Trotsky's and to everybody else. I have been around long enough, and last night I had great leaders of our party, including David Leach, go all the way back to the 90s. Well, I can go back a little bit further than that. My race has run, so anything that I'm saying here, I'm saying for the party. It is time that we look now at doing something for ourselves as a party, and the realisation that we need town councils to organise and introduce people into the Labour movement should not be lost on the leadership of this party. And I would support the Kilkenny call and the Kerry call for the restoration of town councils and move a proper democracy forward in this country once again.
Thanks, Delegate. Sean, thanks very much. I'm going to just pause for 1 minute for the Standing Orders Report number 2. The Chair of Standing Orders Committee, Fionnuala Richardson, to move.
Good morning, delegates. Standing Orders Report number 2 has been circulated in the hall. Point 1, motion number 34 in the name of the Bray East Branch has been withdrawn. Noel Cullen has withdrawn from the election for the Executive Male Panel. Motion 94, the text contained in the circulated Standing Orders Report replaces the text which is contained in the agenda. I move.
Thank you, Fionnuala. You've all been circulated with the report. Can I have a proposer? Proposer. Formally, or sorry, sorry, can I say that again? Seconder. Okay, it's accepted then. Thank you very much. Thank you. We can revert now to motion 50, proposed by the Santry Whitehall branch, Dublin North West. Somebody from the Santry branch? There's nobody here at the moment. Anyone in the vicinity of the hall to be called upon? Formal proposal from the branch. I'm afraid, as you know, the motion falls unless it is proposed. Or I do have a speaker who wants to come in on it, but I can't take the motion without. No, unfortunately, the motion there will fall, I'm afraid. And we move. So the addendum as well, unfortunately, falls. Yeah, the addendum falls. The next item then is motion 51, Dublin West constituency, proposing.
Good morning, delegates. John Walsh, Clonsilla Branch, Dublin West. Delegates, it's a pleasure to speak this morning on this motion. I might just say something briefly by way of introduction to it. And that's that if there's two things that define the Labour Party, I think we could agree that they're our commitment to equality and solidarity. And that's what this motion is about. It's about our commitment to equality in terms of political participation for new Irish communities that have really grown exponentially in size in Ireland over the past 10 to 20 years. And secondly, it's about solidarity with our new citizens and with new residents who have come to Ireland in the past generation. I think it's worth saying, delegates, that Labour was the first political party to adopt within our party pledge and within our constitution a commitment to tolerance and to diversity, a commitment that's signed by every Labour candidate. And I was happy to say that I worked on that in a small way, and I know the Deputy Leader will also be very familiar with it, since he was one of those who proposed it in his capacity a few short years ago as chairperson of Labour Youth. But I might just say something about the content of the motion. I think it's important to say that the motion does give flexibility to the Minister and the Department of the Environment in taking it up. But there's a couple of key principles that the motion seeks to facilitate. And it's really based on the idea that equality is meaningless unless you have a right to political participation. And there are far too many new Irish residents, and I know this myself as a former candidate in the local elections, there's far too many new Irish residents who have become citizens who are not on the electoral register. Now, obviously, a possible solution to that is a requirement for automatic registration, that everyone should automatically register. We haven't gone that far. We haven't been that radical. I see delegates nodding. Maybe we should have. But what we're suggesting is that there should be a facility whereby when someone becomes a citizen, that they would then be included on the electoral register. And this would be something as simple as having a polling booth at a registration booth at a citizenship ceremony, where a new Irish resident would be able to take to make the pledge in becoming a citizen, and would then be added to the electoral register, would then be able to register in the same place. So it's really a practical solution to a significant problem of political participation. I see I'm running down a little bit on time. Perhaps the Chair would be tolerant with me on this occasion, since I made the mistake of not writing a speech, and therefore what I'm saying is much longer. And I know that's something that many delegates here and perhaps some public representatives are also familiar with. But perhaps the other point I'd like to make is that there is a genuine problem, and it's not the fault of local councils, but there's a genuine problem where people who have become citizens continue to be registered as local voters. And it's important to say it's not their responsibility necessarily to get that changed. In the periodic reviews that the councils do of the register, an L voter, a local voter, should be upgraded so that they can vote in a general election and in referendums. That sometimes doesn't happen. So the other provision we're suggesting for consideration of the Minister is that where that occurs and where a mistake has been made, that when someone presents themselves in a polling booth and they're registered as a local voter, that they would be able to vote, they would be able to cast a ballot in a general election as long as they can produce an Irish passport, the evidence that they have become a citizen. And we think that's, again, a reasonable way of getting over a difficult problem in the system. And finally, it does call for appropriate legislation to be brought forward, but it does give flexibility to the Minister on how that should be achieved. We're not being very, very prescriptive about it.
Okay.
So perhaps I just would commend the Minister on the impact he's made so far in the department, and just commend this motion for his consideration.
Thanks
Thank you,
very
Chair.
much. Paul Mulhern from the Rathcoole Dublin Midwest branch to speak on this motion. Paul. Thank you.
Delegates, Paul Mulhern. I live in a multicultural and multi-denominational society. The day I was born, I was an Irishman or an Irish person, and then I wasn't. I was part of the community. You're only an Irishman for just that second. The day you're made a citizen, the day you're born, you're Irish. Don't like badges. There's a badge being put on the immigrants that who become Irish. We should not badge people. We should not. And we shouldn't make special differences for them. We shouldn't put them on the electoral register unless they want to go onto it. Be very careful on this one. I was a bit puzzled about this one. I'm Irish. Anyone who's a citizen is Irish. We shouldn't make special laws to make them do this or make them do that. Just think carefully about this. I know there's a good thought in it. There's no badness about it or anything. But we shouldn't put badges on people. We're a multicultural nation, multi-denominational. We're going to become bigger as more and more immigrants come into people, but we can't be saying to them, you're the new Irish. You're Irish. It doesn't matter what culture you're from, what religion you are. You're just Irish, not new Irish.
Thank you, delegates. Thanks for that. Can I just ask for your indulgence now? I gave the right of reply for motion 45, and the speaker or the proposer on motion 38 is asking for a right of reply, so I think it's fair to give him a right of reply. And we do have a little bit of time, given your huge cooperation this morning. Thank you, delegates. So I would ask John now just quickly to reply.
Thank you, Chair. John Feely, Sligo Leitrim. John Dowell, is John around? John, it's good to have this debate because John has actually highlighted a potential flaw in our proposal here to invest a portion of the 10 billion of credit union funds that's held, sitting in bank accounts, earning 0.9, the kind of interest rates. I happen to be reasonably familiar with this because I'm on the investment committee of our local credit union. We, in a small credit union in Carrick-on-Shannon, have 11 million. And we're gladly lend it out, but quite a few people, we're getting more money in. We're in a strange situation, and this has happened to a lot of credit unions. More is coming in. When we ran into a bit of difficulty some years ago, we thought, well, we're going to lose a lot of people that start withdrawing. It hasn't happened. Now, I do know one of the reasons is the 100,000 guarantee that's there, and I'll let you know we don't have any 100,000s in our kitty, but people feel, but I hope it's more than just feeling of security of the money. There is a solidarity, and this is where I was trying to bring in the concept of solidarity, the cooperative movement. The cooperative movement in Ireland, sadly, it's more or less disappeared. Here in Kerry, I compliment the Kerry Co-op, but essentially Kerry Foods came out of the cooperative movement, but is no longer a co-op. I know maybe I'll be contradicted on that too. Very successful in company, of course, but the cooperative concept is gone in a lot of manufacturing. Here I see the cooperative movement via the credit union. Now, let's get back to this investment concept of the 11 million that we're trying to do something with. Nothing we can do. We're only allowed to lodge it in a bank. at 0.9%. We would see it, as John highlighted there, a bond. I'm not talking about us investing directly, but through some bond concept. And in following on what Joe Costello had said there are things to be looked at within the whole, what do you call it, the cooperative building agencies as well. So there is, it's just to get the idea in and get us debating it, and
thank you,
keep up savings with the credit union, comrades.
Thank you, John. Thanks. We have a final speaker who had indicated on number 41, and given that we have 2 or 3 minutes, Dennis Leonard from the Kilbeggan branch. Sorry, Kinnegad.
Thank you, Chair, for your indulgence on that. I was also going to second the motion on climate change. Unfortunately, that didn't come up. But I want to commend Minister Alan Kelly for the work that he's done in government. I think finally we realise what a Minister for the Environment is, what he should be doing, and what he's done on housing, on water, what he has done so far on public transport is something we can all stand over very proudly. Companies often get governments to change their ideas on wars so they can go and promote the arms industry. Other companies try and get governments to rubbish climate change so they can get what they want. The fact is, we must take our environment seriously. We look at sub-Saharan Africa, we look at all the problems. 9 of the 10 hottest years in the decade have been, in the century have been in the last decade. Water will become as valuable as oil, make no mistake about that. We do need to conserve it. We need to build new forms of energy, whether it's solar, wave, geothermal. We must enhance public transport like Minister Kelly did when he was in office. I think it's only George Bush who actually believes that climate change isn't real. And I think we need to look at, and what the protesters outside the door need to realise, yes, water is a human right, like our friends on the Republican side like to say, but the fact is it costs money to get it to the tap, it costs money for it to be clean, and it costs money to be something we can stand over. Those of us who went to a well for years, those of us who were in public water schemes in rural Ireland, know that paying for water is fine once it's clean and it's something we can stand over. I want to commend Alan Kelly for what he's done in this area by being transparent, by being clear, because unless we conserve our water, unless we conserve our energy, Ireland must be a leader in this, and where wise governments go, people will eventually follow. And I'm convinced they will follow us on water conservation, they will follow us on energy regulation and conservation, and they will follow us on protecting the planet, which is what we should all be about.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you. Delegates, I think I've opened a Pandora's box that I need to close, but in 1 minute I have a final right of reply from John Walsh on motion 51, and we are tightening up on time now. We have the reply from the Minister to follow.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair, and I'll complete within 1 minute. I want to thank Paul for his contribution. I think it raises an important point. We shouldn't put badges on people. We should promote equality. I would just say perhaps one thing quickly. There's no compulsion in this motion. It won't force anyone to vote. It won't place any constraint on anyone in our community. It's really just about facilitating new citizens to participate in our democracy. It's purely about facilitation. There's no compulsion whatsoever.
Okay, thank you very much. Alan Kelly, Minister, if you can please take 5 minutes to reply. Thanks. And just while Alan is moving over, delegates, I want to ask you to be, for the next session, in the hall sharp at 10:55 to allow for the TV section. I'll explain to you more after this session, but just to be as quick or to be as prompt as possible. We want the hall full. I want you to know that now so that you have time to prepare. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair, and thanks for the contributions. Colleagues, when I was asked to take this job, I was asked to take this job because of housing, and the Labour Party has always been the party that delivered on housing. T.J. O'Connor, Jim Tully, Dick Spring, Brendan Howlin, Emmett Stagg, Jan O'Sullivan. And I want to continue that and make sure that we can deliver social housing and housing in general across this country, and I want to thank everyone for their contributions to the debate. We have $4 billion in social housing. This is the largest investment programme ever in the history of this state, and it's the Labour Party that are delivering that. So I want to thank everyone for their contributions on that, and also on homelessness. In relation to the motions, I would ask that two motions be sent back purely on a technical basis. Motion 32 in relation to rent control. I'll speak about that in a second, but it's more a language issue, and 44 in relation to the referendum. The referendum, ideologically, I have no issue with referendum on water, but I also have to be an honest and straight up character and take on board the advice of the Attorney General in relation to that. And I've put in a triple lock in relation to this, which I believe it was necessary, and I took it as far as I could. So I'd ask for your support in that. In relation to motion 48 on local government, you know my feelings on this, colleagues. I think they were aired up here by the contributions. I was always very nervous about the programme of reforms that took place. I look at my colleague Ciara Conway, who was a member of Dungarvan Town Council, and subsequent to that she became a TD because she was a member of Dungarvan Town Council. I'm not going to overpromise on this issue, except to say that it's an issue that I feel very strongly on as well, and I will be supporting the motions that are put forward. In relation to the motion on waste, we need to stop the race to the bottom on waste. It can't continue. Working with my colleague Jed Nash, I will look at the whole waste industry and changing the practices. The big data is coming up in July for waste industry to ensure cowboys can continue to operate in it. And also Jed Nash, through his phenomenal work with special responsibility, will be looking at regulations there to ensure we don't have a race to the bottom in terms of wages, which we all know are disgracefully done in this country. I support my good friend and colleague John Walsh in relation to his motion on 51, and I'm glad he came up and made the clarification that he did. And thanks for the drop of history, John, in relation to our time in Labour Youth only a few years ago. I want to speak a little bit on housing. We have an issue in relation to housing, and I want to thank everyone for their support. But I also want to say this. We also need cooperation, and we need cooperation from NAMA. We don't need NAMA to be always selling to the highest bidder. There needs to be a social dividend for the people, and that social dividend is the following. Is that a certain proportion, not all, a certain proportion of lands are put aside for various different projects in whatever capacity we can deliver to ensure that we have affordable housing into the future. I also want to talk in detail now about rent. The single biggest issue in my portfolio, and it's a wide portfolio, the single biggest issue I want to address in the near future is the whole issue of rent. We have a situation where landlords feel in some cases they can get away with increases in rent that are absolutely scandalous, and we need to bring an end to that. We need to bring about certainty through various different regulations and legislation if necessary to change this. And I am committing here that I am intent on entering the market to change this. It has to be done. The methodologies of how we're going to do it are going to be brought before government. And I say here, I will do everything I can to ensure we bring about rent certainty while housing supply is going to be built up in the coming years. Now I want to touch on my favourite topic, water. People often ask me, do you hate dealing with water and Irish water? I actually enjoy it. As many of you inside here, and almost everyone in this room knows me, I enjoy a challenge. We hear an awful lot about people speaking, and we'll hear them later on today, I suppose, despite not wanting to, talking about the right to water. Well, I want to ask those people the following. What about our children's future's right to water? What about their right to water into the future? Because they have no sustainable policies that will deliver water for my children, for your children, and for your grandchildren into the future.
Okay, Alan, we'll move on.
Chair, you give a bit of indulgence. I'd appreciate it. I'm asking you as Deputy Leader.
I'm trying to save your TV section.
Okay. I just want to point out that not even the United Nations believes in the right to free water. And I also want to point out Cuba. In Cuba you have to pay for your water. But it's not really just about water, lads, is it? We all know what it's about. It's about an agenda which they've had before in property tax, in waste, in relation to bin charges, and it's this. They will bring people to the top of the hill. And do you know what? They won't be out with their checkbooks when people have bills to pay, because they will lead them to the top of that hill and then they will blatantly abandon them.
Thank you very much, Alan. Thanks.
Colleagues, I just want to conclude by saying the following. What the Labour Party are doing in relation to housing and water. We are the Labour Party. We are the party of work. And up to 2020, the policies we are pursuing in housing and in water will deliver 70,000 jobs. And that is the real figure to think about.
Delegates on the motions, can I ask you to raise your cards in favour of motion 27? All those in favour? Against? Carried. 28 in favour? Against? Carried. 29 in favour? Against? Carried. 30 in favour? Against? Carried. 31 in favour? Against? Carried. 32 in favour? Against? Sorry, 32. 32, there has been a proposal to refer back motion 32. All those in favour of the referral back? Against? The motion is referred back. 33 in favour? Against? Carried. 34 is withdrawn. 35 in favour? Against? Carried. 36 in favour? Against? Carried. 37 in favour? Against? Carried. 38 in favour? Against? Carried. 39 in favour? Against? Carried. 40 in favour? Against? Carried. 41 in favour? Against? Carried. 42 in favour? Against? Carried. 43 in favour? Against? Carried. Composite 3 has been asked for a referral back. All those in favour of the referral back? All those in favour of the referral back? All those against? The motion is referred back. Motion 45, a proposal for a referral back from SIP2. All those in favour of a referral back? All those against? The motion is referred back. Number 46, all those in favour? Against? Carried. 47 in favour? Against? Carried. 48 in favour? Against? Carried. The addendum in favour? From Donnybrook in favour? Against? Can we take it again? All those in favour of the addendum? From Donnybrook. Sorry, from Donnybrook. The one from Donnybrook, the other one fell. All those in favour? Against? Carried. 49, motion 49, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Motion 50 has fallen, and the addendum. 51 in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, delegates. We're going to clear the room now. So at 10:55, be here, or be square, or stay here. Oh, you can stay here, guys. No problem.
here now in Collins Barracks on the 30th of April 2013. 12 months ago we set out to conserve the Starry Plough, the wonderful flag that will be here in the museum for forever and a day, and the Labour Party will always be remembered for it.
It's actually very emotional, you know, in many ways, partially because of the difficulties the country is in, and partially, I suppose, because there's just something about the longevity of the party that fills me with hope and pride for the future as well. And people will stand by it, and I think Ireland will come through and triumph. I think both the Labour Party will triumph and the people of Ireland will triumph.
I've been a member of the party for many years, and I'm delighted that the Centenary Committee of the Labour Party with Oakthron Ahern to come along tonight, the 90th anniversary of the return of Jim Larkin to Dublin from America. It's quite momentous. It's excellent.
I think this has been a great occasion, a sort of a fitting culmination to the year of events to mark the centenary, and I think it's particularly appropriate that there will be something physically left after the year of celebrations to mark the centenary, and the flag will now be seen and will be available to future generations to see, and I hope inspire them in the way that it inspired us.
It is fitting that this project was funded by donations from many individual members of the Labour Party. Not only is the flag itself an important historical artefact, but the symbol it carries has such a special place in the heart of the Labour movement. The Starry Plough elegantly combines two important emblems: the plough, which has always been a symbol of physical productive labour, and the stars, which are used across the world as a badge of aspiration and idealism. The plough with the stars is an expression of the idea and ambition of a better future for working people. Putting the flag on display is important to this decade of commemorations. It reminds us that the history of Ireland in the decade that brought our state into being was far more complex and nuanced than is often portrayed.
So perhaps it is no coincidence that the flag of the Irish Citizen Army is being restored to an honoured place at the National Museum at a time when we are reassessing the values that define our modern Irish society, when we are invited once again to a critical consciousness as we struggle to recover from the social costs of an economic model based on extreme individualism, driven once again by an acquisitive greed located in a property bubble, and seduced by a false version of growth that has delivered calamitous consequences. The Starry Plough has been restored at a time when we are yearning for a new version of Irishness that accommodates all our citizens, allows them to fully participate in a flourishing society on the basis of equality, and accords each of them the opportunity to achieve their full human potential as they look at the sky and the life around them.
here now in Collins Barracks on the 30th of April 2013. 12 months ago we set out to conserve the Starry Clough, the wonderful flag that will be here in the museum for forever and a day, and the Labour Party will always be remembered for it.
It's actually very emotional, you know, in many ways, partially because